Hi, I'm Lauren Vicker, here with my colleague Tim Franz. We're from St. John Fisher College in Rochester, New York, and we're pleased to be here at the TBLC Virtual 2021 with an oral presentation, Team Projects That Work, Foundations of Teamwork for TBL. Do you have colleagues that are still lecturing as their primary means of delivering course content? Some of them think that moving to team-based learning would be too drastic a change from the way that they usually teach. Well, what we propose is that you try to move them from Sage on the Stage to full TBL with an intermediate step, which is having them focus on teamwork and team projects. And Tim is going to talk a little bit about why that's important.
So why start with teamwork? What we know is that certainly employers want more teamwork. They want our students to come out with teamwork skills. This is not really surprising to anybody in this group, but it is an important step for why we should give them teamwork skills. Second, the teamwork projects allow students to be more engaged with the class. And then successful TBL, if you're going to use it regularly, requires some foundational knowledge of teamwork. So we can transition people to TBL in stages, letting them move from the individual Sage on the Stage to team projects to TBL eventually, if we use that intermediary step. Our basis for this talk is the input process output model that Lauren Vicker and others like McGrath have talked about. And in the input process output model, groups have inputs, things they bring to the group. There's processes, and then there's outputs. The inputs are things like the people, the task, and the context, the environment that they're in. The process variables are what happens during the group meeting. And finally, the outputs. The most important output that we often talk about is the task outcome, what the students are working on. But there's also the person outcomes. Are they satisfied, and will they work in groups again?
So clearly in this short presentation, we don't have time to go over all the elements of the model, but we do want to share some of our best practices with you. So in terms of the input, first we talk about the people who are going to be members of the team. And here when we talk about the people, we like to borrow a page from TBL best practices because we think it's important that students know at the outset that they do not get to pick their own groups and just work with their friends, and also that the process and the criteria are very transparent. We also find it very helpful in the beginning to make sure the students have enough time to get to know one another. And that's whether they're meeting face-to-face or working virtually. And that could be things like just learning each other's names and fun facts, or doing group exercises, coming up with a team name. All of those things will prepare the students for being able to approach the task effectively as a team. In terms of the task, this is a hugely important issue for the professors because you need to develop a team assignment. And that doesn't mean taking an individual project and just turning it over to a team. It means setting up a task that is appropriate for your subject matter and for your students, similar to what you would do as an application exercise when you were doing full TBL, and making sure that all the parameters are really clear so that the students know how the project is going to run, what the time frame is, what the expectations are, and obviously how they're going to be evaluated. And finally, for the inputs, we have the context. And this is where you need to consider the culture of your program or your university or college, and acknowledge whether or not students are even used to working in teams, or if this is something new to them. And are you physically set up for teamwork? Or are you in a traditionally large class amphitheater where it's difficult to get people into teams? Considering those things and the outside factors that may be impacting your students are all going to be important as part of the inputs. Now, in the middle of the model, you remember we talk about the process variables, and these are also significant. And these are things that sometimes you can't be prepared for ahead of time, but they're things that the observant teacher will watch for and look out for as your teams are meeting and developing. And sometimes you actually have to even stop and do maybe a mini lecture or give some guidance to a particular team. So you have to watch as they set their norms and define their roles. And things like conflict. There are times when the professor needs to step in. How do they make problems, solve problems and make decisions? All of these things are important as the team is getting together. And now Tim's going to talk about the outputs in the model.
When we're talking about outputs, we're really thinking about what are those outcomes that we want from our projects. And we can break outcomes into two categories, the task outcomes and the person outcomes. And both are important. As instructors, we often focus on the task outcomes. Well, one thing that is really helpful for students is to make sure that we have a rubric. And I know sometimes rubric is a dirty word, but in this case, the students really want to know what their goal is. And if they have a clear rubric, they'll be more successful on the task, whatever that project is that you've given them. But also, there's person outcomes. How have they done working in a group? How have they done with their teamwork? And really, the best way to assess this is with peer evaluation. Like an instructor rubric, it's really important to have that peer evaluation rubric and let students have practice with it over time so they get to use it several times during the project. And also, what we found is that students often don't know how to evaluate each other, and we get two groups, bimodal distribution, sometimes groups that are everything is great and all students are 5 out of 5, and sometimes they're a little harsh. And so we have started to teach peer evaluation, and we have a LinkedIn post about this that can give you some tips for peer evaluation. Now, in today's environment, many of us are teaching online, and the same things apply to online teaching as they do to face-to-face, but then there are additional considerations. And like with the model, we don't have time to talk about all of these now. We do have a LinkedIn post about these too, so you can look those up at our website. But important when working online is first start with initial meetings, initial face-to-face or in today's environment, online virtual face-to-face meetings, and then make sure your teams are holding regular meetings. Make sure they continue to work on their team building, which is even more important when they are not meeting face-to-face. Now, as the instructor, it's important for us to know the tools and be able to describe them to our students because we have lots of synchronous and asynchronous tools available, and we have to teach those skills to our students so they know what's available and how to use those tools. Now, as instructors, we know it's important to stay organized, and in an online environment, that's even more important because students can get lost very easily for days in the online environment. So we need to remain organized and then set those organizing structures out for our students. And then finally, make sure that the students have a leader in their team who understands virtual work. So our key takeaway here is that teamwork is an intermediary step between the sage and the stage that none of us really want to TBL. And these teamwork processes can also serve as important foundations for improving our TBL in class. Now, next, Lauren is going to talk about some of the resources we have available.
So as Tim mentioned, we have a website, teambuildingprocess.com, where we post a lot of the resources that we have developed over the years. We've been team teaching together and teaching individually and using a lot of team projects. And so we're able to draw on those resources, and we're happy to share those with you. We also have our LinkedIn posts. As Tim mentioned, we post once a week, and we talk about different issues that are related to teaching and teamwork in the classroom. And so those are going to be available for you. And we've got some videos that you can use for your own personal enrichment or to show to your classes as well. So we encourage you to check those out, and we're happy to share those with you. And For additional information, we're happy to answer your questions at the conference. We'll be available for the Q&A session. And if you're watching this after the conference, you can reach out to us. We actually have an email address, makingteamprojectswork@gmail.com. Again, you can go to our website and you can contact us through there. And we even put a Kindle book together this year because we realized we had so many resources that we want to share. And so we're happy to be here at the TBLC Virtual 2021. And we thank you very much for being part of our oral presentation.
Thank you.